My friend Corey sold over $10 million with Amazon FBA Wholesale, and in this video, we break down everything you need to go from complete beginner to taking the first steps to open up your first wholesale accounts this week. Let's get right into it. Corey, thanks for joining me, man. Getting into 2024, a lot of people watching this have started seeing success with online arbitrage and retail arbitrage. They want to dive into the wholesale game, so I wanted to bring you on the channel, talk about your story and how doable it is to get started with Amazon Wholesale in 2024.
Yeah, Miles, thank you so much for having me back, man. The interview that we did, I guess it was, maybe 6 months
6
ago or
months,
so
yeah,
now?
early July, man.
Yeah, that was a really fun conversation because there's a lot of people in your audience I know that are crushing it with online arbitrage. And I think for whatever reason, people have this perception that wholesale is this difficult transition to make, that it's kind of out of reach. But hopefully, in our conversation today, we can help those people see that it's not as out of reach as some people might think. And we've got some really good methods to help people transition into wholesale.
Yeah, so just for people who might not be familiar, that maybe this is one of the first videos they've seen, just in the space, can you break down the difference between online arbitrage and wholesale?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So they're very similar business models, right? But there's a couple of key distinctions to be made. So if you're watching this video and you've never heard of selling on Amazon before, you don't know what online arbitrage is, you don't know what wholesale is, quick crash course is online arbitrage is when you're buying products at retail from retailers, think like Target, like Walmart, those types of companies. You're using different methods to get discounts on those products and then you're flipping them on Amazon, right? Wholesale, very similar concept. We're buying products at discounts, we're flipping them on Amazon, but instead of buying them from another retailer like a Target or a Walmart or a Dick's Sporting Goods, instead we're going either directly to the manufacturer or we're going to an authorized distributor and buying those products at wholesale prices in massive quantities and then turning around and flipping them on Amazon. So, like I said, very similar concept, but a little difference as far as like the execution.
Yeah, so pretty similar, but for whatever reason, like we said, a lot of people see it as this like really unattainable thing, right? So you want to break down in this video how you guys can get started with that legit this week in terms of making 2024 your best year yet and potentially adding wholesale to your business to make that possible. So I know you've been in the game for a couple of years and have actually done several different Amazon business models. Can you break down like your story when you got into it, and then we'll break down the years and the transition over the years?
Yeah, so to kind of give you guys just like a crash course of my story. So I started selling on Amazon 2 days after college graduation, which was May 2017. And now I started in a way that a lot of people start. I started going to thrift stores, going to used bookstores, and flipping used books, right? Because I mean, back then it's the same as it is now. A lot of times you can find these used books for 50 cents, a dollar, $2. And if they're these textbooks, sometimes they sell on Amazon for 20, 50, 100 bucks. So that's how I got my start, was flipping used books. And then shortly after I started flipping used books, I got a job in Chicago where I didn't have a car. So I wasn't able to go around to these thrift stores, keep buying these books. I had to really pivot my business model if I wanted to keep selling on Amazon. So around that time is when I discovered online arbitrage, which is obviously your specialty. Around this time is right when tactical arbitrage came on the scene. So I was using tools like tactical arbitrage and also just good old fashioned manual sourcing to go into some of these websites, see what sales they were running, buy discounted products from retailers, flip them on Amazon. Now it's 2020. Well, I guess it's 2024,
As
right?
of today, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, as of today, because I was like, oh, it's 2023. But no, so it's 2024. And so actually, as of 5 days from now, I think January 6th will be, let's see, I think 5 years since I've been doing wholesale, since I started transitioning to wholesale. So, like I said, right around 2019 was when I made that transition. And I started by just cold calling brands directly. I was calling anywhere from 20 to 30 new brands per day when I started wholesale. I started by looking at, and this is a strategy we can get into a little more detail here shortly. But instead of just starting from scratch and saying like, all right, I'm just going to find some brands to contact, I don't really know what I'm doing. I actually started with some of the brands that I was currently selling in my online arbitrage business, brands that I knew were selling well, right? Because I was selling them with OA. And instead of going back to Target to replenish that product, I said, well, hey, why don't I just call up the manufacturer or maybe even find a distributor for those same brands and try to buy that way? And now, if I said, if I'd be lying if I said like, oh, it was an easy transition. Every brand I called gave me an account. Every distributor was great to work with. Not exactly the case, but you put those first 50, 100, 200 reps in, and you're going to land some profitable accounts for those brands that you're already currently selling, and you're going to be able to make more money doing it.
Sure. And so obviously, as someone who's done a little bit of wholesale, not a lot, I actually tried it several years ago, didn't go at it hard before I really clicked with online arbitrage action and done a little bit. Since then, there's two main places to buy from, right? So there's brands and there's distributors. Can you break down how each of those works, the differences, and which you prefer for beginners?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really key distinction to make, right? So when I say brands, keep in mind that I'm also referring, like, I'm just referring to the manufacturer, right? So manufacturer and brand, those two terms are interchangeable. And now that is obviously the company that creates the product and manufactures the product, right? So that's the brand. And now you've got distributors on the other hand, which the distributor is not the manufacturer, right? A distributor is just a large company that the brand has essentially hired to distribute their products to other retail businesses like me, like you. So you can either, there's pros and cons to both methods, but you can either go buy directly from the manufacturer, which will have its own set of pros and cons, or you can buy through an authorized distributor, which again has its own set of pros and cons as well. We can kind of go into the nuances of each, but that is really the general gist of like the two ways to buy products at wholesale.
Sure. And another thing I know a lot of people are worried about too is how do you actually vet that a supplier is legit?
Yeah, and this is, unfortunately, a lot of newer wholesale sellers, they get into the space, right? They're excited by the prospect of being able to buy these products in bulk, get better pricing, and scale a large business. And they're so excited at the prospect that oftentimes they come across an opportunity that to us would be too good to be true, right? It's clearly not a legitimate opportunity. They get scammed, they lose their money, and then they could. It's because they didn't vet the supplier properly. So some things that I like to do to really vet suppliers and make sure that who I'm buying from is legit. So the first tip I'll give you is if a supplier sends you a lead or if you stumble upon a deal and it's just too good to be true, 99 times out of 100 it is, right? Now there are those 1 in 100 products that are home runs that are great flips, but like I said, 99 times out of 100 not going to be a legitimate opportunity. So you can do things like Google the company's address, and not just on Google, but on Google Earth, right? And look up their facility on Google Earth and see, is it a warehouse? Is it a big office building? If it's one of those two things, that's a green flag. But if it's, for example, like somebody's house, like a residential address, more than likely that is a huge red flag, right? Because if somebody's claiming to be a big supplier and they're selling out of their house, doesn't exactly add up. Another thing that you can do is just call them up, right? Look to have a conversation with somebody at the company on the phone. If they answer the phone, if they have, a 1-800 number that has a bunch of extensions, like if they just seem like a legitimate business, then chances are they are. But where you get into hot water is when you're buying from suppliers that only advertise on Telegram, for example. That is a huge, huge red flag that for whatever reason is not common sense to newer sellers. If you're dealing with suppliers that only operate through Telegram or only operate through WhatsApp, run for the hills. But those would be kind of some brief tips that you can use to vet these suppliers and make sure that you're getting legitimate product.
Sure. And so also in terms of just you as a seller being legit to the supplier, obviously Corey and I are not lawyers. We don't pretend to be. A lot of people think you need an LLC to get started with Amazon. You're actually not required to have one. I believe there are some legal requirements to be a wholesale business, or at least to purchase products wholesale. So can you dig into that?
Yeah, so that is definitely one of the key differences between a model like online arbitrage and a model like wholesale. So, in order to even open wholesale accounts with these companies, whether it be directly with the manufacturer or with an authorized distributor, you've got to have a legitimate business entity, right? Because with the wholesale game, it is B2B, right? Business to business. Whereas with online arbitrage, you're technically buying as a consumer, right? So, you've got to have a legal entity in place, right? Which for most people, that's going to be an LLC. Again, talk to an accountant, talk to an attorney, make sure you have the proper setup. But for most people, that's going to be an LLC. And then at that point, all it takes, once you have your LLC established, is getting your EIN number, which is free. It takes 30 seconds to do on the IRS website. And your EIN number, think of it as your business's social security number, right? That's all it is. And the reason you need an EIN number is because you have to have an EIN number to open a business bank account. So really, once you have your LLC, your EIN number, and a business bank account, you're good to go. And all three of those things can be set up in less than a week. And as far as actual effort to get those things set up, less than an hour, right?
Sure. And how do you think about capital requirements to start wholesale? Because obviously, a lot of people have that as a major limiting belief. Online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, they see those as a much cheaper option to get into. But how do you think about the capital requirements?
Yeah. So, and this is a great question as well, right? Because there's a lot of people out there that want to get into wholesale. They like how it sounds. They like the model, but they only have, say, 500 bucks or, $2,000 to start. Now, what I would say to those people is if you only have let's say if you have less than 5K for capital to spend on inventory, if you have less than 5K, start with online arbitrage, start with retail arbitrage, right? But if you have ideally in the neighborhood of 5 to 10K cash for inventory, the more the merrier, though. If you have more than 10K, even better. But that is kind of the capital requirement for getting started in this game, right? And the reason for that is some suppliers, not all of them, some suppliers do have minimums that you need to hit. Sometimes those minimums are $500. Sometimes it's $1,000. Sometimes it's $50,000, right? Obviously, those won't be suppliers that are suited for beginners. But general rule of thumb, 5 to 10K cash to get started in wholesale.
Absolutely. And then, so in terms of finding your first supplier this week, in terms of starting to build that list of contacts to go ahead and reach out to, where should people be starting for that?
Great question. And so I kind of alluded to this strategy earlier because this is exactly what I did to find my first few accounts. And so this strategy makes a couple of assumptions. So it assumes that you're already doing either retail arbitrage or online arbitrage, and you're doing it to some degree of success, right? You've got a portfolio of products, a portfolio of brands that you're already successfully selling. So if that is you, your first step would be look at all the brands that you're selling. And I like to put them in two buckets, right? You've got your big brands and you've got your smaller brands, right? Or your smaller to medium sized brands. Now, when I say big brands, I'm talking, think of brands like Nestle, Procter and Gamble, General Mills, these huge, huge, huge companies. Now, the other angle is any brand that you wouldn't just recognize the brand name off the street, right? So this could be any sort of like smaller to medium sized niche brand. So once you've got all the brands you carry kind of separated into those two buckets, start with your big brands and call up the brand directly. But here's the thing is the chances of us landing a direct wholesale account with somebody like Nestle or like General Mills, very low, right? So when you call up the brand, instead of saying, hey, I'd like to open a wholesale account, you're saying, hey, my name's Corey. I own a retail business. I'm located here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Could you put me in touch with an authorized distributor that services my area? Right? It's a completely different conversation because if you ask for a wholesale account, they're going to say, sorry, no, our minimum is $1 million a month, right? Because some big brands, that is the case. So by asking them to refer you to a distributor in your area, 50% of the time they will give you a warm introduction to a distributor in your area that carries that brand. So you literally just got walked into the door of a good distributor. And chances are that distributor carries a lot of other brands that are going to be profitable too, right? So again, I know I'm getting long-winded here, but this is important. So that's what you want to start, right? With your big brands, take that approach. Now, with your smaller to medium-sized, more niche brands that you're carrying successfully, I say go straight to the source, right? Look up the brand, just Google the brand name, find ideally someone in sales at the brand or even the owner using tools like LinkedIn or using any other contact database tools, and call them up and email them asking for a wholesale account, telling them you want to resell their products within your retail business. So
Yeah.
those two approaches is what I would take.
Sure. And then I know there's good ways in terms like finding local distributors on Google. So can you break down that method as well?
Yeah, and so that's how we found a lot of some great suppliers that we worked with over the years, right? And it's a very simple search term phrase that you can put into Google depending on where you are in the country, right? So let's say I'm doing wholesale and I want to find products in the grocery niche. So I just go to Google and I would type grocery distributors and then my city, right? So I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I might type grocery distributor, Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, a mistake that people make is they look at page one of the search results and anything past page one, they don't look at. When in reality, the best suppliers are more often than not located on page 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 of the Google search results, right? So you want to use that keyword phrase to do an initial search. You'll have tens, if not 100 plus pages of results to go through. And then once you exhaust those results, switch up your search phrases, right? Instead of grocery distributor, Charlotte, North Carolina, maybe you type in grocery wholesale supplier, Charlotte, North Carolina. And by tweaking these search terms slightly, you can get completely different results. And that'll keep you busy for a long, long time. That's one strategy that's worked very, very well for us.
Sure. And then we got the opportunity to link up at the ASD trade show in Las Vegas in August. So can you
Yep.
talk about trade shows and how those are really helpful both regionally and nationally with opening up wholesale accounts?
Yeah, so trade shows, and I've talked about this at length in my content. Trade shows are my personal favorite way to land profitable wholesale accounts. Not only is it my favorite way, but I also firmly believe it is by far the most effective way. And I believe that for a couple of reasons. So when you go to a trade show, you get to meet these suppliers in person. You get to shake their hands. You get to build rapport. You can build more rapport with a supplier in 10 minutes of conversation at a trade show than you could build in 2, 3 months of phone or email conversation, right? Not face to face. So you get that huge relationship building component by attending these trade shows. Two, when you're attending these trade shows, these suppliers are there to sell product, right? They're not just there to shake hands. They want to make money at the show. So we've had really good success showing up to these trade shows, making relationships with new suppliers, and then placing orders with them literally right there on the spot. Because a lot of times at trade shows, suppliers will have special deals, they'll have special discounts, and they're looking to do business right then and there. Another huge benefit of trade shows is that a lot of times, especially trade shows like ASD, they're attended by other Amazon sellers. So you get to grow your network of suppliers on one hand, which is huge, but you also get to grow your network of other sellers on the other hand, which is just as big, if not bigger, because those sellers, as you know, Miles, can bring you opportunities,
Like,
can expand your network. I mean, that's like the biggest hack by far is networking with other sellers at these shows.
sure. And I think something that some people in the comments are going to say, okay, but suppliers say no to Amazon sellers, right? So what does those initial cold calls and cold emails look like? And then how do we handle those initial no's that are naturally going to come just as a part of the game?
Yeah, and again, another great question, and another I think big like roadblock that is more mental, right, for some of these newer sellers that are looking to get into wholesale than is actual reality. So a big misconception is that, oh, suppliers hate all Amazon sellers. Not true. Suppliers hate casual Amazon sellers. They hate Amazon sellers that don't know what they want, but they love Amazon sellers that know what they want, that are ready to spend money, that are experienced, and that are serious about their business, right? So when I'm in the really the medium doesn't matter. If I'm approaching a supplier at a trade show, if I'm cold calling them, if I'm sending them a cold email, all I'm trying to do is tell them who I am and what I'm looking for as specifically and as quickly as possible, right? Specificity is everything. So if I call up a supplier and I say, hey, my name's Corey, I'm an Amazon seller, can I see your price list? They're going to say, no, like, what do you want to buy? Right. And most sellers will say, oh, well, I buy anything that's profitable. And that's like red flags are going off in the supplier's mind. Like, all right, this person is going to waste my time. So take a couple of steps back and rephrase the conversation like this. Instead of calling them saying, hey, I want a price list, I sell anything that's profitable. If you call them up and say, hey, my name's Corey, I own a retail business. We're based here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I did some research on your company. I know you guys carry brands X, Y, and Z. We love those brands. And there's actually a couple of specific, we have a list of products from those brands that we're ready to purchase. We have the exact quantities in mind of what we're looking to buy. We even have a desired price point. So if you have these products in stock and you're at or close to our desired price, I can send you an order today. Who do I need to send that list of products to?
Bang.
Right. So when that is a conversation, the fact that you sell on Amazon, they don't care. Like that doesn't even come up. They're like, oh, well, yeah, you need to talk to Tom in sales. We actually have those products in stock. He can get you set up, and they're transferring you to Tom. Right. Like it's all about positioning, and it's all in the confidence with which you deliver that pitch. Which again, for newer sellers, is not going to be there. But that's why it takes some reps to get that practice and get better at that.
And the cool thing is what you can do too is if you figure out the distributor has a certain brand, you don't even need to have that list of products ready. If they say, okay, what products do you want? Boom, keep a product finder, price stability, bang, you got all for that brand. Now you have a bunch of lists of products. And then either way, you can definitely get it down the line and such, but you can really provide a lot of value by doing like that. And then in terms of like obviously niches, right? So what types of products do you think people should be looking at for? You mentioned grocery, but what other types of stuff?
Yeah, so I think that most sellers, either with online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, or wholesale, I think that they like to gravitate to these what I call just sexier categories, right? Things like grocery, things like beauty, things like electronics, which don't get me wrong, are fantastic categories. We've sold tons of products in those categories. But where I think the biggest opportunity lies, and I think a lot of people are overlooking, are these unsexy categories. Things like tools, things like automotive, things like industrial and scientific, things like patio, lawn, and garden, right? Because when you think about all the big beauty distributors or grocery distributors or beauty brands and grocery brands, those suppliers are getting hit up by literally 100 plus Amazon sellers per week. Whereas if you were to focus your business on being a really great tool seller, these tool distributors and these tool brands, well, yes, they probably still get a lot of inquiries from Amazon sellers, not nearly as many as these suppliers in these sexy categories. And they're just going to be more open to doing business with you because it's simply not as saturated, right?
Sure. And then in terms of just moving forward, yeah, hydrate up, man. We're just spending a lot of game. You get the hydration now. I feel it right there.
Right.
So another thing people think is that you need a warehouse, right? When meanwhile you actually used to have a warehouse. Now you use a prep center, similar to me, just me doing all in arbitrage and such. So how do you think about like what you call building, like I think you say like a remote wholesale business, right? Not having a
Yep.
warehouse, right? Using a prep center. So how do you see that playing into the equation?
Yeah, and so luckily I've seen both sides of the coin, right? Like you said, I had a warehouse. We not only rented it, we actually bought it, and then we turned around and sold it because we ended up outsourcing our entire logistics operation to a prep center, right? Commonly referred to as a 3PL, which stands for third party logistics. So for those of you watching this video that you've never heard of a prep center, you've never heard of a 3PL, what a prep center is and what they do is when I buy my products, right? Let's say I place an order with my supplier, instead of that supplier shipping all that inventory to me, to my warehouse, instead they ship it to my prep center. My prep center receives it. They say, hey, Corey, this is what came in. These are the products that we have on hand. And then all I have to do is tell them, all right, great, prep them and send them to Amazon, right? So yes, I'm going to be paying a per unit fee. So my variable cost is going to be higher. But think about it this way: I don't have to manage a warehouse. I don't have to hire staff. I don't have to worry about payroll. I don't have to pay workers' comp insurance. So I'm paying a slight premium for that hands off nature of the business. But with the amount of time that it's bought back, it's worth it tenfold, right? So it's for that reason. I haven't seen or touched a product in like 2.5, almost 3 years now because the prep center handles that entire side of the operation for me.
Boom. There we go. And so, right, the reason we're getting this video out to you guys today, just in terms of January 2nd right here, is because for the first time in about 6 months, Corey's opening up the Wholesale Challenge. So, Corey, do you want to explain what the Wholesale Challenge is and, what it is as a resource for sellers?
Yeah, so the wholesale challenge is something that we started back in July of this, or I guess of last year, right? July of 2023 was the first ever live wholesale challenge. And what that is, it is a 7-day live training, call it a workshop, if you will, where I teach you how to start, scale, and manage a fully remote 7-figure wholesale business, just like the one I have, right? So the great thing about the challenge is that each day is focused on one of the core pillars of wholesale. So we've got entire days dedicated to things like finding suppliers, sourcing products, shipping and logistics, and then my personal favorite day is teaching you guys how to scale your business by leveraging virtual employees based overseas, which is exactly what I've done in my business. And then, not to mention, there's over $3,000 in added bonuses, extra course content, all this good stuff that you're going to get access to. A Facebook community, a Twitter community, a lot of good stuff that goes into this challenge. We've only done it live one other time. We had about 500 people join us. The feedback was outstanding. So we decided to do it again live January 22nd through the 29th of this year. So you got about 3 weeks to join us if you'd like.
Sure. Cool. And so if anyone's interested, there is an affiliate link down below in the description. And then where can people find you on social media, Corey, to see more of the fun stuff we're up to?
Yeah, so my Twitter is going to be my most active platform by far. So my Twitter is at Ganem Corey. And then I'd say if you're looking for more longer form information, head over to my YouTube. It's just at Corey Ganem, right? So I share a ton of information there as well.
And you got, I know, a bunch of podcast episodes too and everything.
Yep.
So, definitely check out the man, Corey. Then if you guys got questions, we'll be answering them in the comments as well. And our DMs are always open on Twitter, Instagram, and all that. So thanks for coming on, Corey.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.